Hello everyone, my name is Jessica O'Brien. I'm the president of the Women's Bar Association of Illinois. I'd like to welcome all of you to the Women's Bar Cable Show. Tonight we have two distinguished guests who happens to be also my classmates at law school, and we will be talking about domestic relations. Our first guest is Kimberly Anderson, and our second guest is Janice Boback. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Judge. It's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us. Kim, why don't you tell us how you formed this firm?
Well, back in 1998 we graduated, and I went to work at the state's attorney's office, and I primarily worked either in the child support court or in appeals, dealing with children. And then when I left there, I decided to open up my own firm, and I did primarily domestic relations until Janice joined me a couple years later.
And of course, you asked Janice to join you because your practice was very busy. Am I right?
Yes.
And now you're the managing partner.
Yes, I'm the managing partner of the firm, and I joined Kimberly in 2003. She is a monster networker. She's incredibly busy and successful, and she grew this firm tremendously from 2001 to 2003. And because of that, she needed some help. And I was happy to come to Chicago and jump in and help her. And it's worked out very well. We've been partners together and had great success since 2003. We've celebrated anniversaries, and so this year it'll be 13 years. And
13 years.
Yeah, and we continue to grow. We have a firm of a total of 9, and all women, not by design. That's just how it worked out.
Just say it's by design. It's a women's bar show.
But it's really not by design, but it does work for us. We have a great team, and several of us are from John Marshall Law School. Not all of us, but several of us are. And we concentrate only in the areas of domestic relations. That encompasses a lot of different areas, but that's our focus.
Now, before you joined Kim's firm, now your firm, you concentrated in other areas, am I right?
I was in a general practice firm. I worked in my hometown of Ottawa, Illinois, and they didn't do any domestic relations work at all. They did but they did have a general practice, and they did a lot of municipality work, personal injury work, estate planning. I had my hands in a lot of different areas, yes.
Well, Kim, when you founded this firm, you wanted to concentrate in domestic relations. Is that just because of your area of practice when you were with the state's attorney's office?
No, I knew when I went to my first undergrad class that I wanted to do family law. So that's been my practice, my area of concentration all through law school. It was my area of concentration when I was at the state's attorney's office, because you could pick certain areas that you wanted to focus on, and that was my choice. And then when I came out and practiced on my own, that's the cases I took. I mean, I was in parentage court. I was representing every avenue that I could get. Adoptions. So it's grown now. We practice in other areas. Like Jan's got a concentration now just in the military, and she's appointed by a lot of the judges for the military personnel. Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about that too. But I just noticed that you said family law. Here I've been saying domestic relations. Tell us what the difference is.
Yeah,
is that an umbrella, or how does that work?
Yeah, I don't think I don't think there's really a difference, but I think people they understand it better, I guess, family law versus domestic. The family law attorneys, I guess, would call it more of a domestic relations division, but because it encompasses things like adoptions and parentage, people that are unmarried, divorces, lots of different areas in this under this umbrella that we typically, I guess, would just refer to it as a family law practice.
Okay, and under that practice, so you just mentioned a few, but the big one there is really the divorce, right? The divorce proceedings that people come to you. Most of your clients are trying to get divorced, or what are the type of cases that you normally would get? if you were to break your cases down, what is the majority of your cases? Is it mostly divorce, or do you have the adoption cases more?
Yeah, I mean, our caseload has varied over the years. Like at the beginning, I was a bar attorney, so I did a lot.
What is it?
A bar attorney.
What does that mean?
Where you're appointed by the court to represent. Like if you're losing your parental rights, either in an adoption case or in juvenile court, the courts give you a free attorney, and that would be someone like me. Okay. So I would work as a bar attorney a lot in juvenile court. I did abuse and neglect cases, and where parents were losing their parental rights due to some of the actions that they took. So I did a lot of those early on, not so much anymore. Now I would say primarily it's divorce, post-decree, after the divorce. Okay. There's some follow-up stuff that happens. I do a lot of adoption work. So there's a lot of different areas that have changed over the years, but we still dabble in all of those fields.
Now, as a bar attorney, though, so the state pays for your attorney's fees?
Correct.
Is that right? And are there requirements in order to qualify for that?
Yes, you have to get on the list. In order to get on the list, just like we're both child's attorneys, child representatives. Okay. It's the same list, the same kind of requirements, but we had to have had a trial in where we represented custody cases. We'd have a trial. We'd have 5 years of experience. Those certain classes that we take every month. We have to go to that training once a month. So there's certain things that you have to do in order to be on the list. Okay. And then the judges appoint you from that list.
All right. So we'll pick it up from there. We'll have to take a few minutes break.
True definition of hero. And been a hero. Took a heroic effort.
Every day we bring to our fans the world of sports. We speak of heroes and heroism, but there are days when sports matter little and heroes matter more. These heroes don't hit walk-off homers or buzzer-beating threes. They simply made a plan for what to do when disaster strikes. You never know when you might need to be the hero, because you never know if today is the day before a natural disaster. Prepare, plan, be a hero. Visit ready.gov.
Welcome back. Again, my name is Jessica O'Brien, President of the Women's Bar Association of Illinois. I am here with Janice Boback and Kim Anderson with Anderson and Boback, very special guest, concentrating in family law. So we were talking about your caseload, and Jan, you had mentioned, or I think Kim mentioned, that you specialize in military cases. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, we have a concentration in the area of military law, where we represent active duty and formerly active duty members of the military. We've been doing that for many, many years. Actually, since I started practicing family law, I've been interested in this area and worked in it. We do, all of my pro bono work is with members of the military. Not all of that work is pro bono, but all of my pro bono work is with active duty and formerly active duty members of the military. It comes in the form mainly of the call from overseas. A young military member has received a Dear John letter, and their spouse is leaving them or getting a divorce, and it's something that we can take off their minds as far as getting it filed and taken care of for them, so they don't have to worry about it while they're overseas. The questions I get mainly have to do with jurisdiction, division of the military pensions, and how to deal with support when you have the federal regulations regarding the military pay.
Aside from those things that you mentioned, are there specific or different provisions that relate to individuals who are in military duty?
The different provisions have to do, I guess, mainly with supporting your family. If there hasn't been anything filed and you're not in the court system, the military has requirements of how much you have to pay a spouse that you're not living with or that you're separated from. They have specific rules and regulations that are in place until a court orders differently.
So when you say military provisions, is that different? Is that part of the Domestic Relations Act then, or?
It's not part of the domestic relations. It's part of the federal laws. Okay. Army has their own regulations. The Navy has their own regulations. They all have their own different regulations of what a service member must do to provide for their family when they're not together, when they're separated or not living in the same household. So until something is filed and a court order is issued that supersedes that, then they have to follow their specific regulations that have nothing to do with the state domestic relations law.
So is it safe to say then that generally speaking, individuals who serve in the military are not subject to the state act?
No, that would not be correct. They are subject to the state act. So if they file, and this is the proper jurisdiction to file, the courts in Illinois can certainly order a support order, a maintenance award, they can divide the property, they certainly are. But prior to filing, they're under the federal regulations of the branch of the military they're in, because there are certain requirements regarding support.
Interesting. But that would be the same for if the individual is serving the Navy or in the Marines, right?
Well, for purposes of our state courts, they don't care what branch they're in.
Okay.
But if they're the military, the Army has their own regulations, the Navy has their own regulations, and the Air Force has theirs. So each different branch has their own regulations. Okay. So a service member can call me and tell me, this is what I'm under regulation to pay now. If I file in state court, what will it change to?
Okay.
How will it change?
Well, now I want to switch over to the new act that was just effective January 1st. Kim, why don't you tell us the changes of the Illinois Marriage and Dissolution Act?
Yeah, we would need probably a couple hours to
Okay.
tell you all the changes.
The highlights.
Yeah. I guess a significant one is we no longer have grounds. We were always a no-fault state. We could do irreconcilable differences. But now we don't need a ground. We used to have people that would come in, their husband was, having an affair, and then they would want to plead adultery, and then we had to prove that. So it was always it kind of dirtied up the practice, like trying to prove certain things like that. So now we don't have to do that. So we just have irreconcilable differences now. We don't have to have any specific ground whatsoever. So that's a significant change for us. There's a lot less fighting in the beginning.
Does that mean less attorney's fees then?
I don't know if I'd go that far.
Okay.
I don't know if I'd go that far. There's always going to be something to fight about, but at least that's one less fight we have to have.
Okay.
And then, the other significant change is we don't have custody anymore. So we used to have a lot of litigation about that, what the title was. Instead of people worrying about what was inside of their agreement, like who gets to do what with the child, we used to fight about titles. Is it joint custody? Is it sole custody? And people would fight about that a lot. So this new law changes that, and so we don't have custody determinations anymore. And I hope that that's going to change a lot as far as the fighting goes for the children.
But what does that mean, though, that there's no longer custody provision? Does that mean that the kids are under joint custody? Is it equivalent to that?
Well, for school purposes, they still want to know like who's kind of residential parent.
Right.
But for the most part, what we look at now, which is what we always looked at, but we always used to have this title, because a sole custody parent used to get to make all the decisions, and the other parent felt left out. So now what we can do, because it's easier under the laws, we can say, do you want to make the school decisions? I'm going to make the religious decisions. You make the extracurricular decisions. And so we can kind of break up the parental responsibilities now. And we put that into the agreement. And it's easier to sell, I think, to people because everyone gets to have a hand in raising the child.
Sounds like a collaborative law type of arrangement, right?
Yeah, it can be. I mean, most people will raise their children together, with you having some strong points. Maybe your strong point is in education. Maybe mom's a nurse and she's got a strong point there. So if everyone can kind of share the responsibilities for the children, it's going to be a lot better off than just having one person do it.
But what happens, though, if the parents don't agree? Let's just say it has something to do with the type of school that they want their kids to go. One parent wants the child to go to a Catholic school, and the other one wants the child to go to public school. Then who makes that decision? You have to go to court?
Well, under the agreement, somebody's going to get to make that decision. So it could be made a joint decision, and then if we don't agree, what are we going to do if we don't agree? Right now, we say that we're going to go to mediation. There's a mediation clause in there because that keeps them out of the court, and that's kind of the goal, is to keep parents out of the court. The court really likes to see them be able to fix this on their own. So we're seeking, mediation in that regard. But ultimately, sure, if we can't get an agreement and the mediation doesn't work, then we're back to court with post-decree issues.
I'm sure there are other significant provisions, right, and that have changed in this new act that we can talk about in our next segment.
Yes.
Okay, well, we can think about that, right? Right now, let's take a break. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Women's Bar Association of Illinois' Cable Show. We have two special guests today, Janice Boback and Kimberly Anderson. We are talking about domestic relations, or family law. The last time we were here, we were discussing the different new provisions in the new act that became effective January 1st of this year. And Kim was kind enough to give us a few provisions that are new. Are there others that you'd like to talk about?
Other than the biggie, which is the designation of parental responsibilities as opposed to the custody designation, I think removal, it used to be called removal, where where the custodial parent wanted to move out of the state of Illinois, they had to get permission from the court if it wasn't by agreement. That's now been changed to what's called relocation. And it's not just removal or relocating out of the state. If you live in Cook County and some other surrounding counties near Cook County, you cannot move the child more than 25 miles without an agreement or getting permission from the court. So that means you can still be in the state of Illinois but have to get permission. If you live outside in the collar counties, the radius is 50 miles. So the process is a little bit different, where you give a notice. You give a notice to the other parent that you want to relocate more than 25 miles. That's filed with the court. And if the other parent, then the other parent signs it as an authorization, then that's filed with the court, then relocation is allowed. If the other parent is not in agreement, then you have to file a petition with the court and ask to move that 25 miles, even if it is within the state of Illinois.
But I thought custodial was no longer.
That's correct.
In existence.
That's correct. So the designation. No, you did. But the designation is this, and you're right. It happens to me all the time. It's so new. I'm probably still saying 2015 too. But if you have equal parental responsibilities or more parental responsibilities than the other parent, then you can file this petition to relocate. But if you're the parent who does not have equal or has less parental responsibilities, then you don't file the petition to relocate.
That is so interesting, though, because normally a child would have to live with one parent, right? For the majority of the time. So although custodial, the term custodial is no longer in effect, or you're no longer using it, but in theory, one of the parents would have to have the child for the majority of the time. Am I right?
And in the orders or in the parental responsibility agreements, they ask you to designate which parent has the primary residential or primary parental responsibilities, and they want to know who has that 51% or 52% of the responsibilities. But it's not necessarily for our purposes, it's for other states' purposes. Let's say you move to another state and that state has to follow our parental responsibilities or our custody, that we used to call it judgment. They have to know who has custody, because custody may still exist in their state. Or for purposes of the school code, you're absolutely right. The school code wants to know who's got the primary parental responsibilities. So although we're not fighting over joint and sole and primary custody anymore, we still have that fight of who's got the primary parental responsibilities.
Well, what about pets? I think that's a very interesting issue, and I know, Kim, you probably deal with pet, not custody, but pet primary responsibility. How would you call that in a new act now?
Yeah, I don't know if anything's changed about the pets in the new act, but people are very, very passionate about their pets. You know, when I had my
is very passionate about pets.
When I had my 3 dogs, I know there would have been a huge fight if there was going to be a breakup about who took the dogs. And you know, people do argue about pet parenting time. Basically, the courts do consider them property, though. They're not like children, even though people consider them to be like their children. So the best course of action for you, if you really want to make sure that you've got some parenting time or some pet time, with your pet is to get an agreement out of the other, out of your spouse. And absent an agreement, the court can't order any type of parenting time or pet time with your beloved. So you have to get an agreement, or make sure you get an agreement before you leave the house.
That's interesting. You just said that when it comes to pets, they're treated as property, distinguished from when you have kids, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
But how is that? What does that mean? I mean, just explain to us in a basic level. When you're just dealing with, when you're treating pets as if they're properties, what does that mean? That you don't have to deal with visitation, or?
Well, we do. I mean, Jan, didn't you have a case where you had the horse, right?
Well, we did, but that's exactly right. We did, but they treated it as a piece of property. And this was a temporary order. They owned a horse, and they went on these trail rides. I wanted to go on this weekend. I want to go on that weekend. So as a temporary measure, we had to deal with who had to go on which weekend. But when you're doing a final judgment, courts aren't going to divvy it up like that. It's like, you know, it's like a sofa. You don't get the sofa this weekend and you get the sofa next weekend. It's you either decide who gets it or I want it sold. So the horse had to be sold, and you divide the money and go buy your own horse, or you come to an agreement. The courts will not divvy up a horse like they will not divvy up a sofa. And in our experience, I think Kim would agree, if you can't agree on property, and that would include a dog, a fish, or personal property, it's sold and the money's divided.
Which would be devastating if it was your pet.
That sounds really cold.
Yeah.
But I have had a case where the dog was brought in,
Okay.
and the judge wanted to see who the dog went to.
Oh my goodness.
Do you remember
Whoever's
that?
got bacon in their pocket.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So things like that
is interesting.
are interesting, because as Kim said, people are very passionate about their pets. They do think of them as parts of their family. And we've entered lots of agreements where the pets go with the kids for visitation and that type of thing. Although it's not in the agreement per se that you get visitation with the dog kind of follows the child.
There's just so much to talk about when it comes to family law. And really, I hope that you will stay for another segment, another show, and maybe we can talk more about divorce.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you
It's
so
a pleasure.
much. And this is the end of our show. Hopefully you will join us for our next show, and focusing on family law. And this time we will talk more about how to get divorced. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Jessica O'Brien. I'm the president of the Women's Bar Association of Illinois. And thank you for watching our cable show.